empowering parents and early intervention through teletherapy. Today, I had a wonderful conversation with Glory Lichon. She is an Air Force veteran and visionary co-founder and owner of both Glow Bright Therapy and Elevate Beyond Boundaries. She really has a passion for early intervention, for supporting people in the field, and also for supporting parents and empowering parents, that understanding that communication is something that happens all across learners' day. I am really focused on early intervention with our naturalistic interventions courses that launched in September. And really, that is a main focus that we have here at ABA Speech and in my membership, the ABA Speech Connection. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Glory.
You're listening to Autism Outreach Podcast, a podcast full of ready-to-use strategies to help those with autism strengthen their communication skills. Here's your host, Rose Griffin of ABA Speech, a speech therapist and board-certified behavior analyst who shares tips you can use in your next therapy session.
Welcome to the Autism Outreach Podcast. We have a great guest for you today, another Ohioan. I mean, we're basically neighbors in this big old state. Welcome to the show, Glory Lichon. Thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much, Rose, for the opportunity to connect and talk about parent empowerment and early intervention.
Yes, such an important topic, something that I talk about a lot here on the show, early intervention. I have a membership, ABA Speech Connection. Now we have a parent portal is what I'm calling it, but I have found a Cruising with Cruz, Lisa Hausworth. She's actually in Ohio too, southern part of the state. And she is a BCBA raising 3 kids. One has autism, and she shares all about his journey. Yeah, I feel like parents, it's hard. I can imagine it's really hard, right? To find out that your child has some needs and then to maybe dive into an area you're not sure, much about. And so I know that you are here helping parents. But before we get started with that, I listen to a podcast. One of my friends, Matt Sikoria, he has this wonderful podcast, Behavioral Observations. It's the BCBA part of my life. But he always asks people, like, how did you get into the field? That for me is one of my favorite parts. I don't know. I like reality TV. I like to hear everybody's journeys. So share with us how how did you know you wanted to be a speech language pathologist?
Yeah, thank you. And I love hearing people's stories as well. I always love to hear how people started and, what got them to where they are today. For me, actually, I was in the Air Force and I met a speech language pathologist that was a communications professor for one of the classes I was taking in at the time that I needed for my bachelor's in psychology. So I actually never heard of being an SLP, and I didn't even know what autism was, but she always talked about how she loved working with kids with autism and loved her being in the profession. At that time, I wanted to be a psychologist, so I kind of just kept pushing forward with my bachelor's degree in psychology and being in the Air Force. But then 10 years later, I got the opportunity to apply for the UC program at University of Cincinnati for SLPs needing to be. At that time, there was a lot of need for school-based therapists. So they had a scholarship for that program. And then I applied. And 10 years later, I was finally able to push on the journey of becoming an SLP after hearing about it 10 years before from this professor that really loved her profession and career. I kind of shortened it a bit, but in the meantime, I just really loved the idea of helping others, especially with language and communication, and just learning about that area.
That's awesome. Oh, yeah. In Ohio, there was that major shortage. I received my master's degree in 2003, but I remember at the state level conferences, and there were initiatives to try to entice people to become speech language pathologists. And I know Akron U, Dr. Chuck Carlin, a friend of mine, there's an online piece, and they just did a lot to try to have speech language pathologists here. And I wonder if there's a shortage anymore. I haven't heard much about it. So maybe that did the trick.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't heard as much either, but I feel like there's always a need for us. So
yes, right.
It still is, but maybe there's just not that program. But yeah, Akron and UC were partnered in that. But since I live in the Dayton area, I went to the UC part of it. And that's why I was able to join the program.
Oh, nice. So do you know Chuck Carlin then? Do you know who that is?
It sounds familiar, but it's been so long. It was like 2013, so I can't remember.
Okay.
All the
Okay.
places.
So
Yeah.
yeah, okay. That's interesting. And I've had some when I was working in one of the districts, I had students from there and it was just funny to talk about. So and I know we're going to talk about teletherapy because that's something you have your own company now, you're a business owner, very exciting. And there's a lot of trials and tribulations that come with that.
Yes.
Some days aren't
Yeah.
you just like, yes, I'm winning life. And then other days you're like, I help me, right? It's
Yeah,
just
it's like a roller coaster of being a business owner and
it
entrepreneur.
is. I feel like as I've been doing this 7 years, I feel like my emotions get more regulated as time
Mhm.
goes on. But some days I'm like, wow, this is the best day. I can't believe this.
Yeah.
And this happened. I tell my husband. And then the next day I'm like, I need to play golf and retire now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah, it really is a roller coaster. But
it is
like you
hard.
said, I feel like we start to build our capacity just as we grow and learn in the process of those
Yes.
challenges. It really does help us regulate through those problem solving issues that we have to go
Yes.
through at times.
Yes. I know things come up 7 years ago and be like, this would be like a day ruiner. And now I'm just like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. No big
Figure
deal.
this out. Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us when you started, like, when did you start providing teletherapy? Because, in 2020, we all became kind of teletherapists. I embraced it. We were talking before, I'm licensed here in Ohio and also Washington State. We provide this really cool service for kids out in Washington State. We'll get 12 weeks of ABA, 12 weeks of speech therapy, really hard for providers to find somebody in person. So we kind of scratch that itch with our niche and specialty in autism. But teletherapy is not everybody's jam. So how did you get started in teletherapy and providing it?
Yeah, I actually started in 2017 when I was still in the schools and in-person schools, full-time school SLP. And then in the meantime, even as a CF, I started working PRN for other companies just to get more
Mhm.
experience providing in-home therapy with some of the kids that go to like a virtual school or
Mm.
in-person schools, but not within the district. So that kind of like put my foot in the door of seeing like the other areas that we can work in outside of just the schools. And I started kind of dabbling in a little bit of teletherapy as I was still full time. And then in 2018, unfortunately, I did go through the burnout phase of being in the schools for 5 years, not feeling like I was as an effective therapist as I truly wanted to be just because of the high caseloads, and everything that goes on and being a school SLP. So I kind of started having the burnout early on, but I didn't want to leave my kids. I love them so much and I felt passionate about supporting them, but it was just starting to affect also my in-home life, like my personal life with my kids
Yeah.
and things like that, bringing IEPs home and having to write them at 3 in the
Mhm.
morning because there was so much to do in the day and I couldn't finish them. So I made the decision to resign from the school in 2018. And then from there, I became an independent contractor with 3 companies providing support
Mhm.
for speech, some in person in the home. And then also that's when I started having more teletherapy students with them. So around 2017 through 2018, before COVID. So thankfully, I was kind of prepared for that big
Right.
shift to happen to
Mhm.
everybody. But I know it was, something so unexpected that kind of threw people in there without having that time and experience.
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't realize, yeah, she started as school based. School based is really hard sometimes. So I've always kind of divided my time between school based. I mean, at one time I was full time school based and then I had kids 14 years ago. And then I've always kind of done school based, non public programs. That's kind of how I got into, autism and becoming a BCBA. But I'm always amazed by school based, just some of the interventions that people are talking about now in courses and it's 10 hours and there's all these things. And I'm like, how does a school-based SLP have time to
Yeah,
take a CEU course? Like, how do you have time, right?
right.
Everybody needs you. You need to do so many things. So yeah, setting those boundaries. It's really empowering to like start your own business, isn't it? You just feel
Mhm.
like, yes, you're probably super, super busy. You're working all the time, but you're finding that work-life balance that works for
Yeah.
your family and for your mental health. And I think that's really great. And it's so hard when you're school-based every single day. There's just so many things that are hard, that are barriers to the actual therapy that you want to
Yeah,
provide,
definitely. That's what
right?
I felt like. Yeah, like I couldn't really focus in on the kids and
Right.
the therapy that I wanted to provide because there were so many other things going on. But yeah, definitely starting a business, although it's like a roller coaster and sometimes you do work longer hours at times, especially when you're starting, but you do start to learn how to set those boundaries and creating
Yeah.
that life integration that really help support the life that you really want to create while also making an impact.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So we're going to talk a little bit about early intervention. What does a typical early intervention assessment look like?
So for us, it depends on if we're supporting as the main provider, like the primary service provider, or the secondary. So we partner a lot with the counties in Ohio and Colorado and Washington. So we support as a secondary evaluator, doing more of the observations, parent interview, and things like that, while the developmental specialist is working with the child, doing like that direct portion of the standardized assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of teaming up together and supporting that way. For our private therapy families, we use a lot of like the REAL, the DAY-C, really focusing on that language and communication, or we do have physical therapy and occupational therapy. So they'll also focus in on their developmental domains. So really depending on the setting of like who we're supporting for that specific assessment, since our caseload is actually about 95% early intervention through the state programs in those 3 states, a lot of the times we're supporting as a secondary evaluator, with the developmental specialist being in the home and us being virtual. And for like the discipline specific evaluations, we'll focus on our own specific discipline, like language and communication, or fine motor and gross motor for the OT, and also the cognitive and the social emotional areas. So we kind of just understand, what area we need to focus on and who we're partnering with and supporting that evaluation.
Okay. So does your company provide direct early intervention, speech therapy, parent coaching, or a hybrid approach? Like, the one thing I like about early intervention is that focus on the parents are there, right? It's usually in home and you're able to talk to parents. That's another thing that's kind of hard about school-based is there's some parents I talk to a lot, some that, I don't. And so talking to parents is like a barrier in school-based, but in early intervention, they're right there in the mix. So what do you guys provide?
Yeah, so we actually really follow the early intervention parent coaching model. We're really supporting not just the child, but really empowering the parents. So we do observations in their natural environment, and then really utilize what's important to them, what outcome we decided on the individualized family service plan that we developed together prior to starting sessions. And then we really focus in on using their natural environment with their meaningful routines and activities to focus in on the area of need. So really just focusing on observations, like let's say if it's a language and communication, really we would be in their natural environment, whether it's like the play area or, in their kitchen, and really just finding the opportunities and helping to guide the parent in seeing those opportunities and how we can utilize those evidence-based strategies to support and empower the parent, and using those outside of the session, really throughout their day during their meaningful routines.
That's great, because I'm putting together, actually, by the time this airs, I'll have the course. It's about naturalistic intervention. So we have like a 1-hour course, and then we're going to have a 5-hour more in depth. And we talk about supporting parents. But the one thing I was going through and putting the slide decks together last night is, once you realize, like, our brains are like everything's communication, like all across the day and in the car, in the bath, especially these functional everyday routines. It doesn't have to be something that's completely contrived and set up. Is that once you realize how many opportunities there are for communication throughout the day, it's really just endless of times, and not just like, it doesn't mean asking questions and badgering your child to give a response. It's really just kind of making this language enriched environment. So, and it sounds so naturalistic. So I think that's cool. That's definitely our focus here at ABA Speech. So for those of you that are not really familiar with early intervention and what that might look like through teletherapy, can you kind of guide us through what a general early intervention teletherapy session might look like?
Yeah, definitely. So we start off, like you asked earlier, with the evaluation process, understanding what are the child's strengths, and then what areas of focus can we support them with, really building that together with the family. And if we are supporting the early intervention, really involving and collaborating with the team, but really following what's important to the parent. Obviously, we always want to make our clinical observations and recommendations, but early intervention is all about the family, really empowering them along the way. So we discuss the outcome together and develop that during the team meeting, and then develop the strategies together. For the teletherapy model, we really make it as easy as possible for the parents. So we personally use the Zoom platform, the HIPAA-compliant Zoom platform,
Mhm.
and have an EMR system that sends them like easy reminders they can follow, and they could just easily click either through their computer or their phone. So it makes it nice and easy for them. They don't have to like download anything or
Mhm.
open any extra things up. And then just right at the time, they just open up their Zoom, like kind of like how we did today. Time together on the podcast. And then from there, we really follow the guide of understanding, setting the stage, understanding what's important to them, how their week went, was there anything that we need to discuss that, didn't go as planned and things like that, just really understanding how their previous week went. And then going from there with what's important to them that follows along with the outcome that we are working on. And then we do observations in their natural environments, find those opportunities for, focusing on the area of discipline, like language and communication, and then helping the parent understand when those opportunities are happening and what strategy can be utilized in that moment and how that can be carried over into their meaningful routines and activities. We really try to make it as easy to implement, just because, all of us are busy, whether, we have kids or not, we always have, something to do. And if we add too much onto their plate, it's, can be very overwhelming. They're already going through this early intervention process, not really understanding, what's going on or worried about their child and really just needing that support. So we try to implement easy strategies that they can just utilize throughout their day, really kind of like habits that we try to use a word called habit stacking, which comes from the Atomic Habits book.
Yeah. He's an Ohioan too, actually.
Oh, is he? I didn't know
in
that,
Columbus. Yeah.
Yeah, so habit stacking is one of the things that we've brought up in our trainings and things like that. Actually, we just did a parent empowerment training for empowering parents for early intervention success recently with our team. But habit stacking, how can we easily utilize this strategy that we just discussed into something you're already doing, like mealtime or playtime or, bath time, reading at night. How can we easily utilize that strategy? And they can just feel like it's easily implemented into their day, whether, instead of just adding 5 other things that they feel like they need to do, it's just easily added into their routine. And that's meaningful to them, meaningful to their child, but meaningful just to that overall routine that they have together.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that book so much. I learned about that book not because he's from Ohio, but because in business circles, I feel like people talk about that book. But when I read that book, I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense to me as a speech therapist and BCBA. Just what he talks about is so good. Yeah, I feel like I need to tie that into a training. That's a good idea. Actually, I really like it. Makes a lot of sense. You try to make things easy. If you make something like in the field of ABA, we say something that has low response effort. Like if I want to work out at a gym, I know the gym needs to be 5 minutes from my house. I need to have my outfit set out. I'm going to go to that gym way more than I'm going to go to the gym that might be better 30 minutes from my house, right. Traffic involved. Like there's common sense things, but I think that they easily translate into therapy. Just like you're saying, parents are overwhelmed. This is probably not their only child. They have other kids to take care of. They potentially are working as well. And now they're worried about their child probably and their communication. And so how can we help them with these strategies that can be embedded across the learner's day? So I like that. When I was doing more in-home with ABA speech, now we just provide therapy kind of here in my hometown. So I have somebody else do it because, I feel like it's a conflict of interest. But I would just focus on one strategy per month, like do a parent note, talk with the parents. I was doing therapy in their home. And the one big one, and I wonder if you see this with your clients, is parents, I feel like, try to bombard the kid with a lot of questions, or newer providers. Like they don't understand, like the kid's not yet speaking or communication is difficult. But I think sometimes that we feel like if we're not talking or the child's not responding verbally, that we're not doing therapy or something. Do you see that as a struggle?
Yeah. And it was even hard for me too. I feel like, especially when I threw myself into early intervention, I had to learn those strategies that really helped to expand the language and communication naturally versus us always prompting or asking questions. But that is a natural thing for us to do as therapists, I think, is ask questions. And then as a parent, so I feel like I do that with my teens all the time, ask questions versus but yeah, I had to learn that too. But I love the Hannon strategy, the observe, wait, listen,
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing, wait for them to initiate an interaction and then respond and have that back and forth while they're really the ones leading us versus us always prompting and asking questions and things like that. So that I had to learn that too as, as
Yes.
a therapist is like, decrease the questions and then lessen the anticipation of what the child needs. I feel like a lot of us as parents, always want to meet the child's needs and always want to support them and give them the thing that they want. But if we you give them that time to let us know, whether it's by, pointing or initiating a verbal or vocal expression, really giving them that time to let us know versus us, just automatically giving them the thing that they want. I think
Mm-hmm.
listening to anticipation, listening questions, less prompting can really continue to help expand their language and communication.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So what are some tips that you share with parents for embedding communication into everyday activities and routines? Is there one, like, do you want to like give us ideas maybe for one environment, like the car or bath time or reading a book? Like what is something that would be like a take home point that maybe somebody listening that is an early intervention provider could then share with parents?
Yeah, I think definitely just, all of those times are great times for language and communication. Like you said, language and communication, it just happens so naturally throughout our day is just finding those opportunities to really help expand on them. But like bath time is a great one to add that habit stacking. The parent always has to give the child the bath at that time so they can just add like verbal routines during that bath time, and that's like a habit stacking because they're already doing the bath time. It happens every day, and then we can add like the verbal routine of, oh, let's sing a little song, or we're gonna, wash your hair, wash your feet. If we're learning body parts, or expanding on asking for what toy they want in the bath time. So all of those strategies can help be expanded within the routine that they're already naturally doing by just adding it to that
Mhm.
natural part of their day. And that's meaningful to them and that has that interaction between the parent and the child.
Yeah, I love that. And, in some of the research I've been doing for this naturalistic interventions course, um, it said, there's research that says that when students have effective sharing or when they're learning things and they're more kind of heightened emotionally, like in a good way, that they're going to learn quicker. They're going to generalize these skills because I definitely think that's one of the things that some BCBAs really struggle with is, a long time ago, ABA was just discrete trial instruction. That's what people think it is still today, which really isn't. There's a lot of natural environment teaching going on and things like that. But I think that's really kind of nuanced as how to coach parents through those things, or as speech therapists, if you're just working with school age students, how do you work with a facilitator to do things on their end that are more play based? It's harder. It's a harder skill to do something that's more naturalistic versus doing a flashcard, which, sometimes there's a place for flashcards. I created my whole company because I created the action builder cards. So flashcards can be important, but that is like a coaching and that is a really nuanced skill is like, how do we work on communication naturalistically, which I think is a great focus. One more question. I didn't put it on my draft. I hope that's okay. But do you have any families who are getting early intervention who are also getting ABA services or not yet because the learners are younger?
Yeah, some of them are.
Oh, okay.
I would say in Colorado, we have more ABA therapists working with our partnership. And it's actually something that we're looking into adding for Colorado because there's a need there. We don't have any
Yeah.
BCBAs currently, but it is a discipline that we're possibly adding to Globe, right? But we're not, in Ohio, I feel like it's not always available in every county. From what I
Okay.
think, there are some families that do have BCBA and ABA support, especially
Okay.
in Washington. I do feel like Washington does use that, the ABA
Yeah.
service.
Okay, interesting. Awesome. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about providing early intervention services? Anything that we didn't cover?
Just that for your parents that listen, just that they should all know that, in every state, this service is available to you. And, don't be afraid to reach out to get that support. We're here to support you. And, that's the most important thing is that, that you have support services available and empowering you and supporting you through this journey. I know it's so difficult at times to not know what to do, or, to really not fully understand how you can support them, but getting that support early on can make such a difference in not only the child's life, but the parent's life, and feeling that confidence and empowerment in being able to support their child through their journey of early intervention and, further on to school age and as they're an adolescent. So
Wonderful. That's great. And tell me, what is so Glow Bright Therapy? Is that your website too, if people want to reach out or learn more about you and your company?
Yes, it's glowbrighttherapy.com. And then we have an Instagram is glowbright_therapy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great to connect.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rose. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to Autism Outreach. If you enjoyed the show today, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode full of actionable strategies you can use in your therapy room. Write a review too. That would mean so much to me. I always love hearing from you. Have a specific topic that you want included on a future show? Reach out over on Instagram, ABA Speech by Rose, or visit me at www.abaspeech.org.